Okay. Hello, everybody, to this wonderful session on extrasensory perception and extraterrestrial consciousness. So I'm not going to introduce myself because I'm the first speaker, but my presentation is on exploring the mechanism of biofield therapy. And first, I want to set our ontology or hypothesis about consciousness. So this is a tree branch where either you are your brain, and then this is the materialist paradigm, or you're more than your brain, in which case consciousness can be an epiphenomenon, and there is absence of free will in that case, or consciousness can be more than an epiphenomenon, and consciousness can have a causal influence in the world. So we're in that bucket right here. And then if consciousness have a causal influence on the world, again, there's two branches. Either it can be just a local influence, like Stewart hypothesis could be very local to the brain, for example, with microtubule, or it could also have non-local influence in the brain, so that's psi, telepathy, these kind of hypotheses. And the advantage of this hypothesis is that if I can demonstrate this hypothesis, there is no doubt that consciousness is more than the brain. This is based on the ancestral teaching of the CDs, and this is an hypothesis which is not the main hypothesis in mainstream science, but still worth considering. And that's the one we're considering here in the context of biofield therapy. So biofield therapy is trying to heal at the distance. And there have been several reputable articles published over the past decade, some of which are presented here. Here I'm going to present you two studies we've done with the MD Anderson Cancer Center, Lorenzo Cohen, and the MD Anderson Cancer Center is a cancer center in Texas that was rated #1 in the US for a couple of years. So this is the first study about examining the effect of biofield therapy on cellular outcome. And this project was financed by the Emerald Gate Foundation. So here is what we call the biofield therapist. We are calling BT therapist. And we are measuring his brain waves, and we're also measuring cellular outcomes. So there are cells in these devices, and 3 types of measures are done on cells, and I'll come back to this. And this is the paradigm in which we have a pre-baseline where the therapist doesn't do anything. Then there is 15 minutes of treatment in which we have both the EEG of the biofield therapist and the EEG and the cell measures, here tubulin, beta-actin, and calcium concentration. And then we have a post-baseline for EEG only. And then we have a total of 60 sessions, so that means like the biofield therapist did that 60 times. So it's a single case study, but he's doing it many times. And so he's doing it also on control cells, so cells which do not have cancer, and they're basically either absent or cells which are irradiated and are dead. So independently of this study, there was also some measure. Does the biofield therapist influence the cell aggressiveness, the cancer cells? And so this is not data analyzed, this is data from Lorenzo. And here we can see the control versus treated, strong reduction in this measure of relative fluorescence unit, which is a measure of invasiveness of pancreatic cancer cells. So it seems to be strongly reduced here, and this was repeated twice. Now let's move to the EEG of the biofield therapist. Here in this representation, we have 4 conditions. So we have baseline right here, and we have treatment on this column. And for baseline, we have 2 conditions. Either is treating live cells or is treating control cells. Same for treatment. So this is what we call a 2-by-2 design. And in 2x2 design, first we have the main effect of treatment versus baseline, in which we find some difference here in this region. So this is the regions of significance in this topography. We didn't find an effect of the cell. That means like when he was treating cancer cells versus non-cancer cell, it didn't seem like his EEG was different. This was just for the theta frequency band, and then we also look at alpha, beta, and gamma. What was interesting is that for beta and gamma, we had here on the right parietal region some small region of significance. So it means that the brainwave in these frequency bands in beta were specific when the cells, the cancer cells, were present, when they are not present. But it's fairly weak, especially when you compare to this very strong effect here of treatment on the EEG. So very strong effect of treatment, meaning that when he's treating the cell, his EEG is very different. And when he's treating cancer cell versus non-cancer cell, small difference here. Then what we looked is that we looked also at the correlation and potentially influence of the cell measures and the EEG measures. And for this, we used Granger causality. So Granger was the Nobel Prize in economics in 2003 for his formulation of Granger causality, that if a signal X causes a signal Y, then the knowledge of the path of both X and Y should improve the predictability of Y as compared to the knowledge of X, Y alone, which probably sounds Chinese to you. But what it says is basically you're trying to predict Y, which is the dark blue, removing or adding X. Does X basically improve the prediction of Y? This is the basis of Granger causality. And so we did that for cells. We did that cells towards EEG and EEG towards cells. For the beta-actin, we didn't find any Granger causality. For tubulin, we found cell versus EEG. So it seems like the structure of the cell, so tubulin is an indicator of structure, seems to possibly Granger cause some of the EEG measures. And then for the calcium concentration, we observed that the EEG in all frequency bands basically seems to Granger call some of the calcium concentrations. So how do we interpret these results? So first we saw this very small effect of the type of cancer cells on the EEG of the practitioner. The fact that tubulin influenced the EEG could be that some kind of feedback mechanism. We can imagine that the biofield therapist senses the structure of the cell, and the fact that EEG could influence the calcium concentration could be related to cancer mediation, as the calcium has an effect in cell homeostasis. Again, this is interpretation of the data. One study doesn't show much. It needs to be replicated from our perspective, but it's very promising in terms of pilot data. And we had the statistical power because we did so many repetitions. So this was the first study, and now I'm going to show you our second study, which is the same healer, just different target. This time, the target are mice. So here is the setup. So same healer, again, is not touching, but here there is 4 mice. And here we're recording the EEG, the brainwave of the healer, along with the brainwave of 4 mice. The 4 mice, they only have 4 electrodes, and he has 64 electrodes. To our knowledge, this is the first ever setup of hyperscanning. So hyperscanning is EEG across individual between human and non-human. And again, it's fairly difficult to do that because here we need synchronization down to millisecond, 1/1000th of a second. So we need perfect synchronization because the analysis of this brainwave requires that. This is the protocol. So we have a baseline of 10 minutes, and then the blue region is when the mice brain and the human brain, the biofield therapist, are synchronized. And then again, we have a small pre-baseline treatment period of about 30 minutes. and a 10-minute post-baseline. And as in the previous experiments, we have 4 conditions. So either the biofield therapist is hitting cancer mice or is hitting non-cancer mice during treatment and baseline. And then we also have a sham therapist which is hitting cancer mice and hitting non-cancer mice. And I'm going to mostly focus on the biofield therapist, but if you read the paper, then you can see all the results also about the sham therapist. So we did the same analysis, basically, as before, in which here we have these 4 conditions, but now it's not cancer cells, it's cancer mice, and here we have the control. And we found very similar effect. Again, no difference in the EEG when it's hitting cancer mice versus non-cancer mice. And this is for all the frequency bands. And what's striking here is that it seems very well. So this is the first experiment I just showed you before. This was for the cells, and this is for the mice. And you see we have a nice replication effect. The EEG seems very similar in both experiments, even though the design was slightly different. In one, it was doing biofield therapy for 15 minutes. In one, it was doing 30 minutes. The setup was not exactly the same, but it's reassuring that we see very similar effect between both experiments, with mostly occipital here difference between the 2 conditions. And then we looked at the correlation and coherence between human and mouse brain. For the mice, we have 4 electrodes. We have the left parietal cortex, left frontal cortex, the right hippocampus related to memory, and then we have these control electrodes that's related to muscle tone and also movement. When the mouse is moving, there is much more activity on this electrode. And then we looked at correlation. So correlation amplitude of so this is, for example, the brainwave of the human. This is the brainwave of the mice. You see there's 2 different signals, but they're modulated in amplitude in the same way. So this is co-modulation of amplitude or correlation of amplitude. And then we also looked at phase coherence, which is represented here. So phase coherence is when 2 signals oscillate at the same time. And they don't have to oscillate in phase. They can also oscillate out of phase. The most important is that they oscillate together. So we looked at these 2 measures, amplitude correlation and phase coherence between the brain of the mice and the brain and the biofield therapist. So this is treatment versus baseline. You see this in the theta band, alpha band, beta band, and gamma band. And what we observe is that we observe mostly with the neck muscle. So, and here you see this is blue. So this blue means negative, and red means positive. So what that means here is that the correlation was more important during the baseline than during treatment. So we interpret that mostly because it's this neck muscle is that the movement of the mice and the brain of the biofield therapist were co-varying, basically. And it could be that when the treatment was happening, the mice had different pattern of movements. For example, they might be more calm, and this could explain this result right here. However, we also had, for these electrodes here in the entorhinal cortex, we also had some positive correlation, so meaning some coupling between the brain of the biofield therapist and the brain of the mice that was higher during treatment. And then, of course, we looked at the other condition. Some correlation based on the mouse type, but mostly with the electrodes here, the muscle electrodes, and then strong interaction between the 2 measures. So interaction is really what we're looking for, because we're looking for some difference that is specific to the cancer mice in the treatment condition. And we found some here, even though it's also very strongly coupled with this neck muscle. But there is this electrodes here, left parietal electrodes. So this was for correlation. We also look at coherence. Again, for coherence, we have this huge pattern, not only with the neck muscle electrode, but also with all the brain electrodes. And when we have an effect of mouse type, and some electrodes also show effect of interaction. So how do we interpret these results? Well, first, they're not easy to interpret, but one interpretation is the Biofield therapist's brain and the mouse movements. We observe some coupling during baseline. I think that's unequivocal. And then possibly decouple neural response between human and brain during treatment. This paper has not been peer-reviewed, but all the analysis we did were fairly simple: correlation of amplitude, coherence. These are very simple analysis to do, and also we use very aggressive correction for multiple comparisons, so we're not worried about the method, and hopefully it's going to be published within the next couple of months. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I think I have time for a few questions. Yes? Yes?
Is this based on, well, first of all, what type of biofield therapy, what modality? And secondly, is this the work of Bill Benston?
Yes, so this is the work of Bill Benston, and who passed away this year. And this is rapid cycling. So the rapid cycling method of healing. So Bill Benston, for those of you who don't know, is well known for this method of healing cancer for the past 30 years. And there have been several papers on this method specifically before. This is just one of the latest iterations founded by the Emerald Gate Foundation. So the method consists in, and again, I'm not the best person to describe it because I'm not a practitioner. So Dean Radin, who was trained in the method, described it to me as, so it's rapid cycling, and basically the way you train is that you imagine things you want. Okay, you want a car, you want a house, you want to be famous, you want this, and so you just visualize it, and then you do rapid cycling in which you try to visualize this very rapidly, and then the only thing that remains is the want, and that's the healing, in quote, energy that's efficacious in that case. Yes?
Is the healer John Lovac?
The healer is John Lovac, yes. So he's one of the main students of Bill Benston.
So, I've never heard of this before, so this is my first, introduction to what this is. And thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. It's fascinating. So is he the only healer, or do you teach other people to do this? And if so, how do you teach them?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I don't know.
Bill has trained a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, because you know this.
I'm just so grateful to see this data. I have been practicing image cycling to other effects for a long time, but having had close associations with cancer in my family, I've never leaped over the line to actually try to treat cancer with it. So this is very, very meaningful to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent talk, Arnaud. So in terms of the increases in intercellular calcium, have you considered astrocytic calcium signaling, which they use to synchronize neuronal activity?
So all the questions that have to do with cellular measures, I'm going to be very vague because it's mostly Lorenzo work. I can answer any EEG questions.
Okay.
The only thing I know is calcium was measured.
Okay.
And changed over time. That's the basis of my knowledge. But in the method of the paper, it's described in more detail how it was measured, what instrument, etc.
Gotcha. Okay.
So about the EEG then, did you find any dominance in terms of sympathetic or parasympathetic systems during the period in which the therapist was applying the intention, let's say so?
Yeah, EEG is not usually used to measure parasympathetic versus sympathetic would be more HRV, if we have heart measure, which we had for one of the experiments, and we processed. And on the top of my head, I can't remember the exact results. We had heartbeats, and from heartbeats you can derive HRV, and basically from HRV you can determine parasympathetic versus sympathetic balance. And
yes, because in one of your slides you were saying something like, is consciousness always connected with the brain or goes beyond the brain? And we always think of that like someone else's or a distance, a non-local effect, but we disregard the entire body in which the brain is. So we measuring some other organs, we have a second brain, you know that, and maybe that could add something to your research.
100% aligned, the brain doesn't work on its own, and you have to measure other measures. So in this case, we had skin conductance and heart rate. And I don't think we found very relevant signal in heart rate, at least in terms of we were mostly interested in the cell effect rather than the effect, because the effect on the change we see when he's healing is not trivial. It's nice to see that this effect exists, but it's not extraordinary in a sense that, if I'm meditating and you still need good data, you need good repetition, etc. But you will see a robust effect of meditation, especially for people like him who have been practicing a long time. You can expect a strong difference in mental states when he's not doing his practice compared to doing his practice. So we were most interested in the effect related to the cell or the mice in this specific experiments. And maybe we can move on to the next speaker with Raul Valverde on medical biometrics based on gas discharge. And Raul, are you here? He'll be back in a second. So maybe I'll take another question if there is any. Yeah.
Just a question. It's true that cancer comes from stress, and stress is a low vibration, so it's good for cancer patients to stay in the highest vibrations. So that's why after you can fight with the cancer, my mom, she was fighting with cancer, and I was helping like this. And I just sent her to Turkey, take some sun, be okay. And after was maybe half year, 1 year more, and it just disappeared. So it can happen, no?
I'm not an MD.
You didn't try on mouse, sorry. You didn't try on mouse in stress space?
We didn't try on mouse in the stress space, no. But yeah, for sure, it's like, stress probably has oxidative...
Low vibrations, frequencies maybe can make this, or no?
Raul, we're ready for you.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, very good. So welcome to my presentation. I appreciate the fact that you're here. I still have more than last time I was here. That's encouraging. So my presentation is about medical biometrics-based gas discharge visualization technology approach to survival research. You probably wonder, what the heck is this, right? It's a different approach to survival research. Regularly or normally we use EEG technology. So EEG technology has one limitation. Once you're dead, you don't have signals to record. So we decided to go in a different direction by using the bioenergy model that is non-local, that assumes that your consciousness is a set of energies that can be measured beyond what we call death. So let me talk to you a bit about, before I continue, The presentation for today is available. We have a QR code in case you want to download it. It's right there. In case you want to download it and follow the presentation. I also like to take a little moment to thank my team, Professor Konstantin Korotkov, a professor of biophysics in Russia, and also the president of Bio-Well, Jennifer Hamilton, a researcher with the Consciousness Research Foundation, and our president of the Consciousness Research Foundation, Chet Swanson, that is here with us today. So, in any case, let me talk to you a bit about the bioenergy model, how it differs from the neuroscientific model. In this particular model, we consider your consciousness to be multidimensional. What it means multidimensional is not just limited to the physical realm, and you have multiple layers of existence. The first layer we call the etheric body that communicates to the physical body by using 7 nervous centers or energy centers that connect through your organs by using the nervous system. At the higher level of frequency, we have something called the emotional body that contains all the emotional information that vibrates at different frequencies and communicates also to your physical body by using these 7 energy centers. And at a very higher level of frequency, we have the intellectual part of your consciousness that is responsible for your thoughts, your ideas, that communicates also to your physical body by using these 7 nervous centers. We conducted, before this research, a literature review in order to find out if there was enough evidence that this model was used successfully in the research field of psychology. And we found a ton of references that is cited in this paper that we have here that provides evidence that researchers have been using this model successfully to measure anxiety, stress, depression, and even diagnose mental disorders. So the bioenergy model is compatible with the OR model of Hameroff and Penrose in the sense that we also believe that the consciousness is non-local. But we provide a bit more beyond this by explaining exactly how to measure it. Because it's something to say, well, yes, it's non-local, it's fine. But how we can actually prove it? How can we actually measure something so we can understand what's going on at the higher level? At the very low level, the only thing we have is light. Is the photon effect that we have. The photon is a particle that is very generous because we can measure it, but it can also travel over multiple dimensions. Therefore, we can capture at the physical level by taking just a picture energy. That reflects what's going on at the higher level. So that's the basis of our research. Now the question is, how this relates to the survival research? Before we embark into this research, we say, okay, how are we going to prove that there's a continuation of life by using this technology? And if you know a little bit about the survival hypothesis, we have 2 main variables here. One is personality, and the other one is identity. Okay, so in this case, we say, let's limit ourselves to personality. Can we measure personality? That's the question. And can we measure it after that? And we found some references in literature. This reference is based on computer analysis, artificial intelligence analysis, that provides evidence of correlations between energy measurements and pessimistic and optimistic personalities. So this gives us an indication that maybe there was a way to go. We also conducted a study. This is an article that was published in 2024 that looked at transplants of organs. So when patients were recipients of organ transplants, they experienced change of personality. And the personality, it was reflected or similar to the donor. Therefore, that gives us an indication that perhaps this was evidence that the bioenergy model was real. In the bioenergy model, we have organs connected to the higher levels of existence, including emotional and mental energies. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense that some energy is still there after the transplant, and that will explain why people will experience personality changes. So there's a reference there for you in case you want to see the details of the study. So for us to be able to put this in some context that is accepted in the psychological, I would say, psychological research community, we decided to go with the MBTI framework. Why MBTI? MBTI is a framework that is pretty much based on the Carl Jung psychology. Carl Jung also believed in the soul or non-local existence. And MBTI has been tested successfully, mainly in applications for career counseling, for HR, et cetera, et cetera. In the MBTI, we have 16 personality types. The summary of the types are here: extrovert versus introvert, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, perceiving versus judging. I mean, the details are in the presentation. I mean, we don't have much time to go over the whole psychology, but in general, we have individuals that might be more people-oriented. Some people are more inner-oriented. Some people are more empathetic. Some people are more logical. This is the idea of some people being more mental versus being more emotional, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea was to put this in some kind of framework so we can compare the measurements with something established already and accepted in the psychological field. So what we're getting from the GDV device is two types of information. One type of information is the energy measurement. It is actually the energy level that is measured for each of the nervous centers, and we get information that is called alignment. So what exactly is alignment? Alignment is a measurement that will allow us to measure how close is this energy to a frequency. It's a resonance effect. We believe that your personality resonates with these particular nervous centers, and the more resonance you have, the more you reflect a particular personality trait. That is the assumption. This is based also on a research study, a recent one from 2023, where researchers were able to confirm the frequencies of these nervous centers also by using the GDVI technology. So based on this information, we decided to map with the help of Ayurveda medicine. Ayurveda medicine is a medicine that is legal in India, also taught by universities. It is widely accepted, almost as traditional medicine. Therefore, we use this framework for us to map psycho-emotional traits with the nervous centers that we measure. And the assumption here is that the more resonance an energy will have, and the resonance is based on the measurement of alignment. The more aligned is an energy, the more likely a personality trait will be reflected. So based on that, we decided to go and embark in a research with a case study. But before that, we took a look at the previous studies that were conducted with this technology. In particular, a study from 1998 that was conducted by Dr. Korotkov. In this experiment, he used the same technology, but it only focused on the after death. So what he did is he went to the morgue and he categorized the cases based on 3 types. The first type was what we call calm death, people that just die from natural causes. The second group was unexpected death, people that die unexpectedly from an accident, for example. And the group 3 was the people that die from a natural death. Somebody was murdered, for example. Somebody was killed. So based on that, he categorized these 3 groups, and he measured the energy over a period of time with the intention to see if there was any information that could help him to intuit that there was consciousness information from these measurements. So what he did is, after his study, he published a paper, and he found there were patterns. There were patterns that reflected the personality, or not the personality, the type of that each person experienced for the case studies. In 2023, we decided to conduct a preliminary study that was presented at this conference last year, with the purpose to see if there was any correlation between energy measurements and the death process. At the time, we didn't understand really well, what is going on. Okay, let's see if we can find out if there's any correlation, any information that can give us an indication of how to use this information to find out things about the death process. So during this study, we had one participant. In this case, we only collected data from one point in the body by using a technology he calls the glove, which is basically something you just wear. And from there, you take just one measurement. It's like an average of all your energy. And the participant allowed us to measure information before and after that. So what we found here is that even though energy decreases as this person approaches death, just before death, there's an increase of energy, a sudden increase of energy. So that gives us an indication that maybe there's something there that we need to look more closely. So in this study, what we did is we expanded the scope, and we decided to take measurements from all the fingers in order to give us more information and be able to measure what we call personality. The idea of this study was to say, well, can we measure personality? That's the first thing. And then if we can measure it, can we use this information to provide proof of survival? So that was the hypothesis formulated for this study. So what we did after this, we took measurements. We enrolled one participant. The participant kindly helped us to give us information by collecting data. In this case, we used the GDV device by collecting fingertip data that will give us enough data to monitor all the different nervous centers before that and after that. So here we provide an hypothesis. Here the assumption is that the most predominant energy in the measurement reflects your personality. So we say, okay, let's take the measurements. Let's see which energy has the highest energy. Let's see if that matches with the MDTI test. We give the participant a test before that, and we compare. There's a match. After that, we compare. We compare energy percentages before and after that, and we measure and see if there's any significant difference. If there's no significant difference, we say, okay, there is a high chance that personality survives, assuming that energy information carries your personality information. And if there's a high significant difference, that means maybe your personality doesn't survive, or maybe we just don't have it right, right? So that was what we did before the study. We gave the participant a personality test. The idea was to identify the MBTI type for us to compare with the measured information. And this particular test gave us information about the personality of the individual, so we can categorize it among these 16 personality types that the MBTI framework proposes. So these are the results of the energy measurements before death. So we started there on the 8th. The person died on the 29th. I'm not too sure the month, but we go day by day. We try to take 1 or 2 measurements each day. And then we compare with the after death. So this is the after death. Unfortunately, due to family consent, we were only able to get information for 1 day. You know, our intention was to get information for several days, but given the sensitive of the situation, it's not easy to get consent for that. So we got consent for 1 day. So we took measurements after death for 1 day. And after this, we observed a similar pattern as the previous study. In this case, we have all the energies combined in this graph. If you notice, just before that, again, there's an increase of energy. Okay, so this increase of energy seems to be a pattern that is repeated, at least in 2 of the studies that we conducted. This is the average. We took an average of all the energies. So now you can see there's also a spike of energy increase just before that. And then we calculated averages and standard deviations for each of the energies. The most predominant or the most influential energy was identified as the Anahata energy. We took averages, we took standard deviations, and then we compared with the MBTI results. Okay? So these are the results, and we found there was a match for these particular traits. A person that was very empathetic, value of people's feelings, warm, etc., etc. We also had yes, 5 minutes? Okay. Anyways, let me just try to move on. Then we also have measurement of alignment in order for us to be able to verify that the energy was also aligned. And then we decided to conduct an hypothesis test. We realized that 2 energies did not pass the test, meaning the Muladhara and the Sahasrara energies, the Ajna energies seem to have, Ajna seems to have an increase of energy, and the Muladhara has a decrease of energy. Therefore, that gave us some results to interpret. First of all, I mean, the first conclusion, one of the analyses is that the results give us the potential of this type of approach to measure personality and to be able to show personality survival. It's only one case. Obviously, we need more than that to show that this is real and there's consistency. And we also found consistent results with the previous results of neuroscience. Neuroscience shows that at the time of death, most people present gamma states, high levels of frequency. In this case, we have high levels of energies. Therefore, there seems to be a high correlation between brain activity and energy increase, something that we need to investigate more and more to see how they correlate, why they correlate with each other. And we also try to explain this increase and decrease of energy in these two types of energies. First, Ajna. Ajna, according to the Ayurveda tradition, is responsible for intuition, is responsible for high level of consciousness. It's what Indians call the third eye. So it makes sense that the person will, at the time of death, will have a lot of energy there, especially when people go through things like life reviews. And the energy that decreases, the Muladhara, it makes a lot of sense to us because that's responsible for the energy of your body. So when you're dying, obviously, the energy seems to be decreasing. But the other four energies seem to have consistent results, meaning they seem to have not changes that are significant according to the hypothesis test. Some more interpretation of the results. We also try to link this to potential explanation of why life reviews happen. Life reviews, we think about a lot of information that is going to your brain. Therefore, the brain will require this high level of energy that might have a way for us to explain these life reviews that people experience just before death, the increase of energy linked to the gamma states. And finally, we talk about trying to link this to the OR model by trying to think that this type of energy increase looks like needed for information transfer. So we're thinking there seems to be going on a lot of information transfer for what we call the biofield to the, we don't know why, it is called the unified field. And this is probably explained by the increase of energy that people show just before death. So that's it. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our presentation. And here we are open for questions now.
Thank you, Raul. So I think we have time for one question.
Thank you for your work. Regarding the energy centers, in the beginning of your presentation, you said that the emotional center of the body contains, or the emotional center has the highest energetic charge. And I'm wondering what the variance is compared to the other energy centers, or if you indexed those in any way.
Well, this was only based on one case. Okay, this case, this particular person, yes, he presented a high level of energy in that nervous center. But we cannot generalize. This is just one case. Okay, so that's linked to his personality. Yes. That's why we say, okay, this person is more emotional, seems to have what we call, empathy or sensing in the MBTI framework. But it doesn't mean that everyone, right, will have this. It's just one case. I don't know if that answers your question.
So would you expect different indexes for different?
Yes, I mean everybody has different personality. And we're trying to come with a new paper that will show the differences of energy levels according to personality type. We strongly believe that personality can be measured. It's coded somewhere at the consciousness level. And through the device, you might be able to measure it, and we can determine your type of personality by measuring the energy. That's something we're working on. That will be the next paper, probably next year.
Do you have your software here?
We are actually looking to build a software as well, yeah.
So the next talk is Chet Swanson, which I believe couldn't make it, so Raul will give his presentation on remote effects of meditation.
All right, so thank you very much again. So we are here to cover for Professor Konstantin Korotkov. I mean, he has been my mentor and very influential in my work. And he always thought about how we can build a non-human intelligence contact machine, like for example, right? I mean, how we can measure these things, how we can measure distance healing. For example, we talk about distance healing, we talk about psychedelics, all these things. With conventional science, it's very hard to do. I have psychology background, mathematics background, et cetera. I mean, by using traditional statistics, it's very hard to measure this, phenomenon. So he thought about using the device as a research tool that will help therapists and psychologists into new psychologists to provide evidence that things actually work. You know, because using traditional psychology is very difficult. So this presentation is about that, right? I mean, obviously, this technology is not new, something that has been around for a long time. He's the inventor of the Bio-Well device, but the technology itself has been running since the 70s. There's a lot of information on the internet, a lot of papers being published. But this particular presentation is about how do you measure distance effects, intentionality, for example. How do you measure meditation? How do you measure emotions? Talking about emotions. In the biofield, there is a lot of information. You know, you have emotions of people, you have intentions of people, you have thoughts of people there, and as a group, as a collective, we can change these energies, and they can be measured. So I have a few cases, for example, when it comes to spirituality. Can we measure connection to God, for example? Can we measure connection to something higher than just human? This is something that Dr. Korotkov has been experienced for a long time. So we're going to talk a little about that, about his work. This is a nice picture of him. These are his devices, Bio-Well technology. In particular, we're going to focus on the antenna, what he calls Sputnik. Then he uses a water measurement device to measure the water's energy. And then he has two types of fingertips devices. One is personal, the small one, and the other one is for more scientific research purposes. So what exactly is this type of technology? This type of technology is based on what we call the bioenergy field that can be captured by taking a picture of your fingertips. So all we're getting is basically a measurement of the energy glow. We get this energy that is glowing, that is captured with intensity of the pixels and the area. So we are measuring area, we measure intensity, and this can be translated by energy by using some empirical coefficient factors, and that will help us to identify the joules of energy. The model is based on the principle that the quantum system provides the energy. Reality is molded by our consciousness and is initiated by intention. Intention is the main driver of reality and is modulated by emotion and mental energy. Okay? That sounds a little bit too spooky, probably, but this can be measured and eventually put in more scientific terms, which is something that we're working on. So how we can translate this more into, you know, quantum physics and so on. But the principle is there. So this is the essence of the device. It's a device that basically captures what we call a gas discharge. You basically put your fingertip. There's a differential of potential between your fingertip due to the dielectric plate. So when you put your finger, automatically there's a discharge of energy that is being photographed. And this is basically what we use to measure energy. So what kind of application has in the particular research of healing? Okay? So in his work, when he takes a picture of a healthy person, this is how it looks like, you know? Basically, you see energy that has no gaps, that is pretty much harmonic, and doesn't have imbalances when it comes to different views of the same energy. You see, this is the left, the front, and the right, right? So this is the picture of a healthy person. So how an unhealthy person looks like with something like this. After stress, for example, you might find some gaps in the energy, right, field. And you also might find that the energy is not symmetric. So it's unbalanced. Okay, so what we're measuring here is energy levels and symmetry. You know, how balanced is your field? In this case, it's 85%. Ideally, we'll want to have something higher than that to say that your system is balanced. So this is the typical scenario of healing. You know, so he will say, okay, a healer will say, I will perform energy healing in a patient. How can I prove that it's actually doing something? So it will take a measurement before somebody and then after, and then that will help, you know, to provide evidence that the healing is doing something to the energy field of the person. So he has few cases. This is with Dr. Eric Perlt. He has this technique, reconnective healing technique, and he measured the before and after. So there you can see there the effect of the healing to provide some evidence that there was something going on after the healer or therapist performed his therapy. This is something I perform myself. I mean, myself, I'm also interested in this for therapies. In Mexico, I went there and I was a participant of we call psychedelic therapy, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And I was actually interested to see the increase of energy. You know, this was with psychedelics. I was able to see an increase of energy after the therapy. And after the therapy was finished, I also measured the balance. The last 3 columns are measuring the balance. You can see there's an increase of balance. You know, I was already balanced. I was already 94%, but a little bit higher after the therapy. So they give me an indication that maybe it can be used also for psychedelic-assisted therapy. Distance healing, the same clinic was performing something called SAMA. I think it's from Spain, so probably some people here know about this technique. So I was also performing experiments with this particular technique. This is a distance healing technique. So what I did is I measured energy on myself before and after the therapy, and I was able to see the increase of energy as well. And also the increase of balance. See, I was 92.50, and after that was 96, I think. I cannot see from here, but something higher than the 96 or 95. Okay, so another device that he has is the Sputnik device. This Sputnik device captures energy. Obviously, the energy can come from different sources, can be from magnetic fields, different environmental factors, but the main factor is people. You know, there is research that people does have an influence in the energy fields, especially when you have lots of people, a group of people. So he performed some measurements with 3 different holistic healers. Joe Dispenza, I don't think he needs an introduction. Christos Dosinakis and Victor Philippi. And he measured, right, stress. This is stress levels. He was able to identify reduction of stress after some workshops. And energy increase. So normally, as stress reduces, energy increases. You know, so they have an opposite direction effect. He performed also a study for Dr. Joel Dispenza over 4 days to see the effect, the long-term effect of workshops, and he was able to see that in the long term there was also an increase of energy. This is meditation effect. You know, this is about 80 minutes before meditation, and about I think it's about 50 minutes after meditation. So he was able also to measure increase of energy in a group meditation conducted by Victor Philippi. This is something that I did myself. I'm into human-initiated, non-intelligent, or sorry, what's the term? Non-human intelligent contact. So I participated in an event, it's called Contact in the Desert in 2023. Why there? Because people that was there actually were into this kind of experiences. So there was a room there about 35 people. I have my own meditation. The idea was to change the biofield. How I did this is the meditation had ways to change the emotional state of the participants, also use intentionality, use different techniques to change the energy. And this was measured by using the same device. And as I was able to see that right after we started the meditation, well, this case was more like a non-human intelligence initiated contact, we start seeing the increase of energy. Okay? So this has potential for this kind of research. I mean, in that particular conference, a lot of people talk about using intentionalities to start contacts with non-human intelligent beings. So there, it was a perfect occasion for me to experiment with this. So the same view, but this is more of by using graphs. So you can see the energy change effect after we started the experiment. I'm also into spirituality, so the question is, can we measure spiritual effects in people? You know, so in this case, I was able to measure that. I had a group of people, we meditated. The intention was to connect with God, we connect with divinity. So people after, expressing this intention to connect to divinity, actually was able to increase the energy as well. So the intentions are quite measurable. That's what I learned from these experiments. Are there spirituality? Are there healing? Or are there non-human intelligent contacts? Doesn't matter. Your intentions are captured with the technology. He performed another experiment in 2016. Sorry, how much time we have? Sorry. Okay, so yes, that time. Okay, so the experiment in 2016 in St. Petersburg, it was about intentionality. So he had 11 people in different locations, Moscow, Penza, and Belgorod, sending intentions from 11 to 11:30 a.m. He had 2 Bio-Well devices located in parallel from 8:40 to 6 p.m. And there were people there present as well from 9:40 to 6 p.m. And he measured, energy. So contrary to what we expected, the actually energy dropped, the area dropped, right? So intentions seem to have a different effect on energy. So that's something that he measured. So intentionalities, emotions, and thoughts have different effects on energy, something that needs to be researched still. And finally, the model, right? So how do we can explain this in more scientific terms? I came with this model as an electrical engineer. So, okay, let's see if we can come with a model that can help me to explain how consciousness can have an effect on energy. So in this model, we have a circuit, very basic circuit, and the ZAW represents pretty much an impedance that is based on frequency. So if we assume that the energy has a frequency, and the frequency can be changed with intentions and emotions and thoughts, this frequency has an effect on the device. How is this? So the impedance basically decreases or increases based on the frequency of the energy in this case. It looks like this, right? So when the frequency increases, the impedance goes very low. That will explain a raise of energy, And when the frequency is very low, the impedance goes higher. Therefore, that will explain the lower energy. So just an explanation more from a rational perspective. to give a bit of a scientific explanation to this. And finally, a bit of the experiments he has done on energy of water, in particular measurements of intention. Right, so this is the results of intentional influence of a Russian healer, Shomak. I don't know if you know him. And then I have another experiment from Lynn McTaggart. There's a link there for the full experiment protocol where she used also the same technology to capture intentions, and she also measured the before-after, showing a significant increase of energy after intentions were changed, were sent to the water. So conclusions, this technology seems to be relevant for conscious research, especially for unconventional research where we don't have anything else. Most of the paranormal or most of this type of research rely on a statistical analysis, and that seems to be very difficult to use where things cannot be proved this way. So this gives the door for researchers to provide evidence of effects on spirituality, distance healing, etc., etc. However, it misses the theoretical component. I think a lot of this work is mainly empirical, so we need to work more on the theories, and we need to link this to quantum mechanics, electromagnetic theory, DNA theory, so it can have more of a theoretical foundation, so it can become more accepted in the academic community. So thank you very much. That's all I have for today. I'm open for questions now.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for the talk very much. I come from a professional acting background, and my question is, when we're acting, very often when we're acting badly, other people see it, right? Because we think that we might have an objective in a scene or in a play, but actually we don't. So the question is rather about intention. How did you make sure that the intention, when you were measuring the intention or the energy when people were setting the intention, that the intention was there?
I think that's actually a good experiment. Yes, you have people that send you like bad vibes, right? Like bad energy. Can we measure that? Probably we can. I will expect that will have some patterns, but we never. I mean, I have never done that. But I can see the potential effect on the energy for sure. If somebody gives you sends you like a bad energy, to say, right, the bad intentions, you should be able to sense that. But I don't know any article or any research that has been done about it. But something to think about it for sure. It should be measurable.
Any other question in the back?
Where does the energy from the body come from?
The energy from the body, according to the Your Medic, comes from the earth. That's the main source of energy. So it comes from there, and and once you die, you know, it goes just down. Right? That's what we measure.
You mentioned that every being puts out electrons.
Sorry?
You had mentioned that not here, but that every being puts out electrons.
Yes.
And that measures those electrons. And how does it measure them?
I mean, the biofield is...
The question is, how does it measure electrons? I'm not sure people in the back.
Well, the device really, what it measures is photons, okay? And photons, you know, are particles that can be measured because it's light. So you take a picture and you capture the effect. That's how the technology works. It's a biophotonic measurement device.
Any other question? Okay, so we're going to move on to the next speaker, Topper Taylor, on the human performance intention experiment. So, I'll show you when you have 5 minutes left. Yeah? When you have 5 minutes left, I'll show you 5.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good. There we go. Fantastic. I can't imagine a better speech to follow because I can just kind of cut to the chase with this presentation. So first of all, I come to this event and this world of intention and our interconnectedness after a career in children's television and children's entertainment. And, as a child, my first book that I remember reading cover to cover over and over again was Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And if you can imagine the power of intention from Charlie wanting that gold ticket and then ultimately getting it, may have set me up for the rest of my life to arrive here in front of you today. So let me first start by saying that intentions in this particular case are like arrows flying toward a target powered by commitment, which activates healing, performance, and innovative forces within and benevolent forces from outside. So during my research, I would actually argue that negative forces are not that impactful, that positive forces are, in reviewing some 50 or 60 experiments historically, and selfish intentions are not as powerful as healing or compassionate intentions. So for example, the roll of the dice, I gotta win 7, I gotta make money, these things are not as powerful as compassionate healing intentions. So intentions in this particular case represent who you want to be, what impact you wish to create, and your commitment to carrying out an action. The power of these, in this particular case, my study uses athletes. And athletes were chosen for a number of reasons, one of which is because there was an enormous amount of data. And one of the things that is challenging when I reviewed a history of intention experiments was the limited number of data or the limited number of people. And so in this particular case, I was kind of guided towards thinking about swimmers. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But I also just thought it was significant as well that an athlete, especially a Division I, which in the United States is the highest form of amateur athlete, a Division I athlete leads an incredibly intentional life. Like, these swimmers, for example, probably start swimming when they're 9 years old, and they're in the pool for hours every day of their lives until the time they get to college, which they're around 18 years of age. And, in college, they get up every morning, they are in the pool for 2 hours, they go to see a nutritionist, they go to class, they come back, they're in a pool for 2 hours, they go to the gym, they eat under a nutritionist, they meet with a mental therapist, they go to bed, and they repeat. And they do this at this level to try and achieve 1 second in speed faster than they've swam before, which could be the difference between a silver medal, a gold medal, or no medal at all. So it's an incredibly intentional life that they're living, and I have great admiration for student athletes. Intention originates, in this case, in the mind, and I want to go back a minute to talk about sport and the history of sport, because I think it's quite relevant and fascinating in this moment in time. if we look at sport as kind of originating during Greek times, the human being, said the Greeks, are both soma, body, and psyche, soul. So a whole person, to the Greek system, practices mental and physical training. An athlete wins contests and becomes whole and wise. Debates occurred at the gymnastique, or the gymnasium, near actually the wrestling competitions, where people could wrestle physically and intellectually in a healthy debate, where the opponent not only challenges your mental state, but your physical strength. And I think that's quite interesting, because when we think of today's World Cup or Super Bowl, we think about the mental conditioning as well as the physical conditioning of an athlete. So sport was also created to prepare a nation for war. It was also to create a healthy citizenry and a citizenry to follow rules and establish leaders. Ancient times, the people who came to the Olympics came from all different races and creeds and nations and languages and religions and customs and financial diversity, and yet they all played on the same stage, they all played by the same rules, and they all were trying to achieve one end, to win. So sport becomes kind of a fascinating backdrop to look at when it relates to not only intention, but when we think about sport today, one could argue that it is our temple or our religion. Today we build billion-dollar stadiums instead of churches, and we create community around our favorite teams rather than go every Sunday morning to our local church. And we go to a physical location to worship our favorite team and teammates, and we pray for their victory, which is a form of sending positive intention. So let's go into that a little further. The idea of praying for a victory, or let's just use in this context, sending intentional vibes for a win by our favorite team. In the US, Las Vegas, the home of gambling in the United States of America, is extremely accurate in predicting the outcome of a game. It's remarkable to me, how they're able to pick not only the ultimate cumulative score between two teams of a baseball, basketball, football, soccer game, but also, the score at the end of a quarter. It's remarkable how much forecasting they're able to do on past performance. A home field team, a team in American football that is at home, has statistically a 3-point advantage. Now, interestingly enough, over the years, that's gone down to about 2.7, but let's just call it 3 points for the sake of conversation. Why is that? What's the science behind a 3-point advantage? I believe, and so do many of my peers here, that it is the intention of the energy sent from the fans and the audience in their presence and in the community around the stadium that actually accelerates performance of the individual athlete. So you heard from Dean Radin this morning, who's one of my heroes, and he made a reference, in fact, to studies that were done around measuring energy. In fact, one of the early studies that Princeton did was a study that monitored energy with that ERG device at the World Cup, at a Rolling Stones concert. It was remarkable. It was absolutely remarkable. You can imagine the dial going off the chart. Another interesting result of those studies was they went to the pyramids on a Sunday morning at 5 a.m., and the energy level was off the charts. So what does that say about our stadiums and our churches and the places where we've historically aggregated to focus our intention on something, that it has kind of a lasting staying power? And it also means that these areas are nurtured. They're actually nurtured in a way that they become ultimate beacons for sending and receiving energy. So, you know, the average person has about 80,000 thoughts per day. And of those 80,000 thoughts, about 85% of them are negative, which is kind of remarkable. When I heard that early in my research, I just walked around with a diary for about 3 days, and of course I couldn't write down 80,000 thoughts, but I certainly wrote down as many thoughts as I possibly could, and I was shocked at how many negative thoughts that I had in a given day. Bringing attention to that, of course, and changing that is probably a good idea for all of us, because we can live more of a positive life and consume positive energy. But if we look at ourselves as broadcast antennae, which we've seen today and which we've heard in the 2 or 3 lectures before mine, you know, we actually emit energy. And if you believe in a quantum world where we're all entangled energetically and atomically, then it stands to reason that our thoughts actually being broadcast send waves into the universe that actually leave an imprint on the quantum field and have an effect. So we should really think about what we're thinking about every day in order to kind of improve the effect that we're having on the universe. So in this context, and after reading many experiments, like, quite frankly, the ones we just heard, I became incredibly intrigued at creating an attentional experiment coming from a business world versus a medical world in the power to improve human performance or creativity or innovation. But my committee members who helped me guide me through the research process for my PhD strongly recommended that due to the time constraints of a higher educational PhD, that we focus on sport because there's an enormous amount of data there. So, you know, to give you some more context, in addition to what we just saw in the previous 2 lectures, I was fascinated by a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. One was, rather than healing someone, as we saw in this previous experiment with a shamanic energy healer standing in front of a patient, there were probably 20 experiments done in the 1980s and 1990s at Stanford, in California, Princeton, UC San Diego, and McGill College in Montreal, where they did remote healing, where the actual shaman was on the other side of the continent, sending the same kind of energy and healing intentions to patients with similar positive results. This leads to the conclusion of entanglement and a broader quantum field in which we're all interconnected, in which we all have influence, not unlike rooting for your home team and having an impact on their performance. In this case, the result was a healthier human being who was sick, and the vital statistics showed that. So, you know, another power of intention, which I found fascinating recently in the last 10 years, the Cleveland Clinic, which is a powerful research medical institution in the United States, did a very interesting study where they asked patients, a control group and a focus group, they asked the focus group to focus from sitting at home, sending an intention that they were actually going to the gym and working out, and to visualize themselves on a treadmill and lifting weights. And over a period of 3 months, their muscle masses actually increased. Now, it didn't increase to the same degree that the control group went to the gym and lifted weights and worked out, but it did increase, which shows all of us that our mental state and our positive thought actually has an impact on our own lives, let alone the people that we're sending intention to. So now we dive into the actual experiment. So the first idea was, which sport to choose. I chose a non-defender sport where someone's not trying to block you from performing, right? In basketball, somebody's trying to block your shot. In soccer, somebody's trying to block you from kicking a goal. But in most Olympic sports, there is no one trying to prevent you from actually performing at your peak. The same with swimming, and the same with golf. So the trick was, within a higher educational institution with some prominence at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, was to try and find now a coach that would agree to doing an intentional experiment on their athletes. And sure enough, the newly appointed woman coach, who was the head coach of both the men and women's swim team, said, "I believe in intention," so off we went. What we did was we sent two forms of intention remotely. One from a shaman with at least 20 years of experience in energetic sciences with a long track record of healthy performance and credibility. And the other was actually an electronic intention device that was created by William Tiller, who is another very interesting scientist in the same category of like a Dean Radin, who has unfortunately since passed away in the last 2 years, but he was at Stanford, theoretical physicist, and then when he started focusing on intention, Stanford very politely suggested that perhaps he would retire and work on his intentions outside the academic sphere, which he did. And he set up a foundation called the Tiller Foundation in Arizona, and this device you can actually purchase at thetillerfoundation.org. Yes, that's a plug. I have nothing to do with it, but it actually, you'll see in a moment, resulted in some wonderful positive results. So we had two forms of intentions being sent, one by a shaman, one by this electronic intention device, which intention, by the way, was written by someone who was, I'm not going to call her a shaman, but I'll call her an expert intentionalist that has done this for very many years. The shaman every day sent positive intention for between 15 and 20 minutes, and the electronic intention device worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I told the shaman that we were going to use this electronic intention device, she became very competitive. She was like, "I'm not going to lose to a machine," right? And what was so fascinating is that her original intention was quite short and came from the heart, whereas the intention written by the Tiller Foundation was very technical and a page and a half long. And I didn't share either of the intentions with each other because don't want to collude the experiment here. But when I just told her what the opposition was doing, she then aided her intention by putting the names of all the athletes into a ping pong ball in her pool, and she would get in her pool thinking water to water would have a positive effect, and every day would send intention from the swimming pool to these swimmers. I thought that was wonderful and a novel idea. So then, what we did was got, obviously, releases from all the students, which you have to do in a human experiment within an organization. But they never met the shaman. They never met someone from the Tiller organization. They just knew that some of them, not all of them, would be receiving positive intention to help them increase their performance. That's it. We got their names, cell phone numbers, and home addresses. That was the request, interestingly enough, from both the tiller organization and the shaman. The name, cell phone number, and home address. Now, you can imagine what you may about the home address, because that would be a location, right, where you could send this intention. But the actual phone number was kind of interesting, because from the tiller organization perspective, they were using a broadcast device, and not unlike the cell phones we actually carry around, these are like broadcast devices, right? We send information to the cloud, but we receive information as well. And so they believed that by putting the intention through an antenna, I mean literally a radio antenna, and having the name of each individual athlete, that the phone who is on your person all the time, and actually probably for most of us either in our pocket or in a breast pocket, which is close to vital organs, that it would have a greater impact. And this was something they had done before in healing experiments, and not necessarily in athletic intentional or performance experiments. And so we used 25 team members. There were 50 in total. So we had a control group. And the people we focused on, there were men and women equally. And they had to be in their second year. They couldn't be in their first year. And because we needed to make sure that they were in the same program, doing the same exercises, going to the same classes together, et cetera, and they couldn't have transferred in from another school. What was brilliant about, and we focused, by the way, on they had to do the same swim at least twice in a competitive environment each year. So you find that swimmers actually try a variety of different styles, but their expertise is usually in 2 or 3 different styles. And so someone would, by a style, I mean freestyle, butterfly, backstroke, side stroke, etc. And so the beautiful thing about swimming, which I did not know, is that swimcloud.com is a website that when you start competing on as a child, you start posting your times of your meets in your specialty. So this data dated back for every one of these swimmers, 10 years. And every time they were in a meet, every time they swam a style, it was recorded. And so there was literally thousands and thousands of pieces of data that I could use to correlate the impact of intention on these student athletes. And we also used a different kind of control group. We took the same half 12 women, 12 men at other schools in the same division, Cal, Berkeley, Arizona, a variety of other schools who had the same qualifications, that were in their schools for respectively at least a year, that had run similar to event races, so that we had a control group that wasn't in the same location as those at the University of Southern California, and we achieved significant statistical results. So using the electronic intention device. The shaman did show improvement over previous attempts, but it wasn't statistically significant. And as it turns out, when the experiment was over and I sat down with the shaman, there was about a 6 weeks period of time in which she had COVID, and she had a bad case with foggy brain. And even though she continued to get in the pool every day for 10 or 15 minutes, she was concerned that perhaps her shamanic energetic sending had been affected by COVID, and that perhaps this would have been the result. So we started in August, which is when they begin to train the student athletes. September is when competitions start. It goes all the way to April, and then there's national championships in May. And wouldn't you know it, the women placed in the top 10 in the United States, the team, the men placed in the top 20, their highest ranking in over a decade, and the coach won Coach of the Year. And at the end of year bash, the students were elated, and then they realized that wait a minute, there was this intention experiment that happened this year. I wonder which one of us got intention. They'll never know. But what we did was we sent out a survey at the very end, and I'd say half of them felt that they were receiving something, and half of them did not. Those numbers did not correlate to who actually received intention and who did not. But there is no doubt that the data showed statistical improvement of human performance. And I think that one of my favorite lines from the head coach of the men and women swim team was that there's nothing to believe here. This is not religion. It's only energy. And we can potentially use energy to shift human performance, and this could be but yet another means by which to optimize human performance in all forms of athleticism. So what I will do is end with, going back to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and, wondering whatever happened to that boy who got everything he always wanted in his life. Well, he lived happily ever after.
Thank you, Topper. You're such a great storyteller. We don't have time for questions, but I'm sure Topper can answer your question separately. And now we have Maria Balaet, a neuroscientific perspective on studying extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yay! Let's see. No audio. Let's see. Let's give the aliens a minute to come. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for being here on the penultimate day of the conference. And also thank you to the organizers for having me talk about something as crazy as xenocognition. And let's see where that takes us today. For those who might need an introduction to the title alone, xenos comes from Greek, and it means otherworldly or foreign. And then cognition, it refers, as one might expect, to thinking. So essentially, the topic of my talk today is alien intelligence. And I actually want to start with a little story that has nothing to do with aliens. I recently joined a yoga class where I live in my community, and I've been doing yoga for quite a few years now, but there was something very special about the way that the instructor was teaching this class. She wasn't really trying to get anyone to achieve a certain pose, or she wasn't very constraining about the type of aspects that she wanted other people to follow. And essentially, she gave permission, and with every single movement, she would tell everyone, well, actually, don't do what I do. Try to do whatever it is that works for you, and when it feels right, just stop there. And I had a really profound insight there as a neuroscientist very much interested in intelligence and studying this on a daily basis, because it made me think a lot about my work, as one does when they go to a yoga class to relax and run away from work. And I actually started thinking that this is very much similar with the way that intelligence and evolution works, because it's not about trying to hit a particular state or a particular phase. It's about trying to wiggle around enough up until it's just about right to allow for a certain movement to happen, for a certain state to emerge. And it doesn't have to look similarly across everyone doing it. And there was this nuance really that catalyzed this idea that intelligence itself tends to evolve in all sorts of ways, and that might be very meaningful for us to study. And on a day-to-day basis, apart from practicing yoga, I'm a neuroscientist. I study intelligence and altered state of consciousness in very many settings, but one of the examples of the work that I carry out is the Great British Intelligence Test drug use study arm, which I led for the past 5 years. And in this study, we originally recruited 500,000 participants to essentially be part of an intelligence test. But it turned out that a large proportion of them were using drugs recreationally, and from that point onwards, I set up the drug use study arm and followed their patterns for the past 5 years at 6 monthly time points. It's fascinating data, but it's actually not what I'm talking about today. And if you want to be up to date with my publications, I left a link here for anyone interested in this. And there's a variety of other conference talks online and so forth. Do keep an eye to this, because I update it regularly, and there's some very exciting papers coming out, I have to say, this year. But coming back to the topic of our talk today, and I really hope that there are some astrophysicists in the room at the moment who are actually noticing the Earth doesn't spin the correct way. But that is on purpose, and it is on purpose because it actually speaks exactly about trying to use something that you are looking at on a day-to-day basis and turn it on its head and come up with something new. And in my case, some of you might see that little note I left to myself there, which is that my dream job is being an astrocognitive neuroscientist, replacing my human subjects with aliens. And this talk is about my process, about how I would go about doing that. But let's start with the basis. What on earth is intelligence for us humans, and what do we do to conceptualize it? Well, I have to say that intelligence is such a multifaceted construct. There's not one way to think about it. And there are a variety of different ways in which it has been approached in neuroscience. I summarize some of the ways here in which intelligence is multifaceted. So there is the biological perspective, which is to do with the blueprint that each of us has. Then there is a psychometric perspective, which is with the ability that an individual might have at performing certain tasks. And then there is like the more social intelligence and how someone navigates the world and all of the factors that come with influencing those biological blueprints that everyone carries. Now, in neuroscience and in psychology, one of the ways that intelligence is conceptualized is as a hierarchy of factors. So we can think of a general factor, if you wished, G. This is how it's been commonly described, that underlies all of the different abilities that someone might have. And those would be things like fluid intelligence, or solving problems on the run, crystallized intelligence, the accumulation of knowledge over time, memory and learning, visual perception, auditory perception, cognitive speediness, or how fast can someone actually perform a task, and so on. But then at the bottom of this hierarchy are all the sensory inputs and the speed that someone has. And it is this view that tends to be dominating the field, really. And one of the ways in which I look at this in my own work, for example, which is something that I'm going to be coming back to quite a bit in order to support some of the points I'm making, is this cognitive domain complexity hierarchy. And in here you can see that there are certain abilities that are quite foundational, but then the more an ability increases in complexity, the more it would be more at the top of this hierarchy. And the reason for that is because it actually uses the abilities lower down on the pyramid in order to be enacted. And this is some work from my PhD mentor, actually, from way before we met, where he actually illustrated that all of these distinct cognitive abilities actually have underlying networks operating in the brain that characterize very, very different patterns of thinking. Now, how do we get about actually exploring this and trying to deconstruct intelligence, if you wish? And there's one method, which is just, let's take everything to the ground and try to pick up the pieces afterwards. It's not very nice. It actually happens a lot that we know a lot of what we know about how the human brain functions by looking at injury studies. And you might even think about a computer being smashed to pieces and trying to see, well, if I take this out, does it still function? If I take this other piece out, does it still work? And it's not the same. The more you take out, the more all of the abilities collapse. And that's a very important point, actually, from what I'm trying to communicate here. There's a more elegant way of trying to conceptualize that without having to destroy anything, such as a brain. And we can look in the various building blocks in nature. So we can look, for example, at how the brain of mammals is different across like different species. And these are just some of the species that we do study in the lab. You can see how little complicated the rat brain is compared to the others, not little complicated in itself. You can see a monkey brain that tends to be a lot more similar to the human brain itself, and then perhaps a cyborg brain. It's good to try to look into the future as well, to when we actually merge with technology a lot more. But I think this perspective is actually quite important for trying to contextualize how intelligence tends to be dependent on this functional organizational hierarchy as well of the brain structures itself. And that might be really important. But still, it is very much dependent on one factor, which is this centralized idea of a nervous system, which is characteristic to mammals, but it's not necessarily characteristic to other species, which also display intelligence. And we can see that we don't need to have a centralized nervous system for something to be intelligent. If you look at octopuses, for example, they are a brain, they are a nervous system. It's a more decentralized perspective on nervous system orchestration. Again, if you look in nature, you can see fungi, which organize themselves in like super complex networks, and that's actually crazy. There's been so many studies looking at fungal intelligence, actually, and it is just a completely different system from the system that we have with the biological human brain and nervous system. They don't operate with neurons. And then you can look at viruses, and you might recognize this little guy here. I'm sure that we've all had a bit of an encounter with it before. This is COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 virus that mutated in all sorts of different ways in the past few years. But even viruses are considered to have a certain form of intelligence that is extremely distinct to that of mammals, that of fungi, that of octopuses, and so forth. And very easily, by looking around us, you can see that intelligence is not this unitary concept that depends on things resembling us. So what does it mean for when we actually meet aliens? I've not met them. I'm sure that other people have, and I'd be so willing to speak to anyone who has after this conference session. But one of the things that I want to point out with what I've explained earlier is that we may have certain assumptions about how cognition or intelligence works in otherworldly species. And I think that all of those are not a necessity for intelligence to emerge. It's not necessary for a central nervous system to be there. It's not necessary for a nervous system to be there at all. And it's not even necessary to be alive, because viruses aren't. And we have some insights from evolution into why all of these differences emerge, and differences in behavior and differences in intelligent behavior specifically. And we can definitely see that there's one way in which all of the living forms have evolved, branching out from common ancestors and so forth. So it might explain some aspects about why there is intelligent behavior there. But there's also non-living forms that we do assume have some intelligence, and that is because we can measure it, and we look at it, and we see that they carry out very complex behaviors, and behaviors that may seem goal-directed or in response to answering certain types of problems. And what's important about this is that despite the origins, we can measure it. And we can measure it in humans, for example, with cognitive tests. I'm sure the majority of us have had at least once a cognitive test done to us. Even solving a very little mathematical problem would count. But there are certain types of tests that humans have invented for this purpose, and they take a variety of shapes and forms, either pen and paper, or like we've developed in our lab, more elegant and fun for participants to use. But they're not specific to humans. Cognition can actually be studied in a variety of other species as well. And I really liked when this paper came out recently, because it's trying to teach researchers essentially how to use this online type of cognitive testing to get the best out of the rats and get really into their brains and measure all of their abilities. There's also tests that can be used for measuring octopus intelligences and how they try to escape labyrinths, for example, or trying to give chimps a sequence of numbers that they can then identify in an order. And then, I don't know, high-five the researcher and give the banana at the end to show that they indeed know how to count. And what's really interesting about this is that there seems to be scope for commonalities to be discovered across species. And this is a paper that came out quite recently as well that actually looks at how if you measure the faces of different species when they perform tasks, so they had rats, humans, and monkeys, there's actually quite a lot of commonality in how they behave when they complete tasks. And you can predict their cognitive performance simply by watching them, not only looking at their results specifically. But then when we look at other species, such as viruses or AI for the matter, intelligence takes a different form. And cognitive tests are not necessarily the useful ones because you couldn't get a virus to try to carry out mathematical problem solving, for example, or maybe perhaps we can and we haven't figured out a way to get them to cooperate. And that's also a possibility. But one way to look at it, for example, by studying mutations and this adaptability, which is also a feature of intelligence. And we can expect that if we are to start interacting with novel species, they would have a certain way in which they change over time, which may actually not even be linear, or they might not follow Darwinian principles. If we are to talk about technology and AI, obviously it goes through a lot of training to try to get to the state where it is actually deployed and people can interact with it. But then afterwards, it can mimic a lot of problem-solving abilities that humans have, and that is something that we can directly measure as well. But the real question is, we have all of these different examples on Earth, and they might not be enough. So what do we actually do in order to try to imagine a completely new intelligence system? Because we need to remember that none of these different factors might actually be applicable. And this is where we have to follow a principle that I like to call the collapse of the known. We have to be able to forget everything that we've ever known about ourselves, our intelligence, how to measure it, and potentially physics and mathematical convenience that we're so used to using in justifying our beliefs about why the brain operates a certain way. And I think that's really difficult for us, especially if we are to take into account this Bayesian perspective on the brain that has become so dominating and so popular in human neuroscience, which essentially states that the brain updates its knowledge based on new information. But essentially, in order to carry out that updating, there is a set of priors that is necessary. And I think this set of priors is really what has to be dismantled. And it's very hard to dismantle a very solid set of priors for a human. Now, there are people who nevertheless have a lot more relaxed prior beliefs about what might be intelligent and what not. And I think this is where I get really fascinated with sci-fi and with writers, with artists, with everything that emerges from pure imagination that doesn't actually have anything to do with biological or physical reality in many cases. And I think that's a very nice starting point for us to think about. And I have several examples from some films that I absolutely loved. So we have the heptapods, for example, which are alien species that communicate via these logograms that are made from smoke. And they don't perceive time linearly, so that's even more interesting, because in the film they were trying to communicate about future events. So that is something to consider as a very non-human way of perception to begin with. My absolute favorite of all times, annihilation, the shimmer in annihilation, which is essentially this iridescent phenomena that merges the DNA of the different structures that are around and creates completely novel species and interacts with the world by directly modifying it. So it's almost like we become the colors of the shimmer, and the shimmer is the art. It's just like, let's splash everything together and see whatever happens with the world after. Brilliant mind who came up with this. Or something that I know is one of my mom's favorite, hello mom, and so on, the Solaris Ocean. And this is essentially an entire planetary-sized ocean that can communicate via telepathy with other humans, and again, defies a lot of the physical laws that we are aware of. And finally, the final example I'm going to give about aliens in the media that I really enjoyed looking at are these monoliths in Space Odyssey. I thought that was another crazy idea where essentially these monoliths appear at a random place in this monkey colony, and over time they send various signals that essentially give the trigger for evolution, and that's how humanity appeared. It's absolutely crazy. And you might think that I have a lot of time on my hand, but what I ended up doing, and these are just the first 3 because I didn't have space for it, it's about 50 entries here. Basically, I went through all of this popular non-humanoid, I want to be very clear on that, non-humanoid types of aliens that different people have come up, different artists, different writers, different filmmakers, and so forth. And I went through them and I thought, well, how do they actually think? How could we actually study that? And how does that refer to their consciousness? And what might it tell about the way that us humans might end up from interacting with them as well? But my mom, who I want to reference again, has a very, very nice saying, which in Romanian would be viața bate filmul. But what that essentially means is that we can't really use matters of imagination and conceptual structures to base inferences about reality with ease. And the reason for that is the same reason why when someone makes a film that's originating from concept alone and not from lived experience, that doesn't feel so personal to us. So it might be that none of the different imaginary outcomes that we had actually mean much. And it's not a prerequisite that any of the known biological, physical, mathematical rules will be followed, and it's not a prerequisite that any of our previously imagined ways about going about alien intelligence would be followed either. On the note of intelligence, one of the things I also want to mention is that intelligence and consciousness are not the same thing. And something that is intelligent doesn't have to be conscious, and the other way around. Something that is conscious doesn't necessarily have to be intelligent at all. And there's this view that intelligence and consciousness might actually be orthogonal to one another. And I post an image here that Anne-Joseph was circulating recently. And I'm not actually sure that I totally agree with this, because it becomes very arbitrary when we take just one measurement of consciousness, one number, for example, to indicate how conscious something is, and then how intelligent something is, much like the issues of why should we use IQ to be like a unitary measure of ascribing someone's intelligence score. Because then what tells us that mice are less conscious than humans, really? It really depends on individual's definition of consciousness, and I have a bit of an issue with that. There's a different way I like to conceptualize the relationship between intelligence and consciousness, and this is like a correlation matrix. And this doesn't mean anything, it's a mock correlation matrix. I just want to make it very clear, this is not real data. This is just to exemplify a point of a way to look at the relationship between intelligence and consciousness, which be to think of intelligence has different features, consciousness has different features. These features have different correlations and relationships to each other. But it doesn't mean that there's one and another that have to be equal, and so forth. All of this is in a paper that I'm currently still writing. I was really hoping to release the preprint and distribute that today, but as everything goes in academia, things get slowed down. And in this paper, I am going to be discussing in more detail all of these aspects, and also be talking about what are some of the pillars of measurement in neurocognition that are inspired from all of this, essentially turning it on its head, turning the neuroscience of intelligence on its head, and how can we infer goal-directedness, communication, cognitive ability type, whether there's any terrestrial analog, what sort of cognitive tests we can use, whether consciousness is present to begin with, and whether that poses a risk to the researchers themselves, because I think that's a very important question, actually, when we think about us actually interacting with other beings that we don't know much about. And as a target, I would actually put it out there that we might even begin for creating a cross-species cognitive testing tool, and that's something that I'm very excited about pioneering, actually. And this is my lab, asset lab, that I founded this year. And I just started this group. It basically stands for Alter States Evolution and Technology Laboratory. And no, we don't study aliens. I've not met them yet, and so forth. I wish that would be the case, but it's currently not. And what we are trying to do is to understand what is most fundamental about our changing and revolving reality, deconstruct it, and rebuilding from the ground up. And I always like to end my lectures by saying knowledge is power, but there's something else that I'll say with this one as well, which is that rebellion against past knowledge is insight. And I'd like to leave you with that. Thank you. We might have some time for questions.
Yes, we have time for questions.
Okay, one question. We have one over here, I think.
Really cool talk.
Thank you.
I don't know if you've read The Cortex and the Critical Point by John Beggs, but it might be worth looking into. So criticality applies not only to biological organisms, but also to
I've
other
read
natural
on
systems.
criticality quite a bit, but I'll have a look at that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I just read it. It's fantastic.
No, very, very interesting one. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Amazing.
Any other question? I have a quick question if there's no question. So, is there a question? Oh.
Oh, no, you go for it.
About the brain. But I was like under the impression that when you have many connections and that the information flows very fast, somehow that makes you more intelligent, and that doesn't need to have a brain, and if you think about it as a species, now we communicate much faster through the internet, and you could also think of us as a big brain, no, because like I process information and I talk to you and then I go home and I transmit your information to my husband or whatever. So and our communications are more, that we have more, a higher network and faster. So would one be able to see intelligence in this way as well?
No, absolutely. I think it's a very important point that you make about like the different connections. And when you said that for the first time, I thought about the different connections in the brain. And that with the model that I present with like the different brains of different species being more and more complex, that would apply to a certain extent. About the complexity of different things that one can do. But I think you make a very important point about this collective intelligence of actually connecting multiple brains. And actually, that is seen with quite a lot of species that seem to have almost like a telepathic way of communicating with one another. With more like humanoid type species, the only place where I've seen it is Avatar, and I thought that was great. But I think with the emergence of internet, that's not a perspective that is looked at, but it definitely fits the bill because we are interconnected. And I guess what it's next for us to do is to take a meta position and try to look at what emerges out of all of us being connected on the internet all at once and see whether we can come up with a measurement of that.
We need to
the
move
internet
forward.
is like a telepathic communication in a way, right?
Yeah. Might as well be. It's like the massive brain on the www. Great. Yeah.
What Yvette said is scary. If you take as a measure the combination of my brain,
we have to move forward,
and my capacity of use the tools, then the younger generation, it's out. It's always this factor is growing. So it is approved that all of the new tools multiply by your own IQ, then the younger generation much better usage in all social media, all sorts. So if you make an integer as an indicator of these two factors together, it can only grow.
Potentially.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Maria. Sorry. And now, last but not least, we have Andrea Signorelli, virtual reality, a game changer in lucid dreaming induction.
Does this work already? It does. All right, I have quite a few cables, so it's gonna take a while. Let's go. Yes. There we go. Over here. All right, I hope you still have a little bit of brain cells for the last presentation. I don't. For sure. All right, let's go. Thank you everyone for being here with me this evening. So I am gonna talk about virtual reality and I'm gonna talk about lucid dreaming and how these two can actually like work together really nicely. especially to have lucid dream induction. Now, I will explain a little bit better what this means. This is actually a joint project between the University of Trento, where I am based right now, where I am working as a researcher, and the Italian Buddhist Union Research Center. So, yeah. So, who's this? I don't know what to say, seriously, because like my career just started. So I have a biomedical engineering master's degree and also bachelor. Right now I'm doing a post-master research fellowship in cognitive science, and especially in the altered states of consciousness field. So right now I'm working in lucid dreaming especially, but we have a lot of other projects going on and starting soon on like meditation, on flow states, and again, on virtual reality and how this can be used as a valuable tool in order to modify our states of consciousness and make studies about those. And of course, I am a lucid dreamer since, I don't know, 2015 probably. I should check my dream diaries about that. But yeah, it's really a passion of mine. I started training for it since at least 2015, I believe. So yeah, I feel very passionate about it and very grateful to be able to actually work in this field. So for those of you who might be wondering, what is lucid dreaming? Lucid dreaming is a state of consciousness in which individuals become aware that they are dreaming while still in the dreaming state. So this can happen in a variety of ways. You could go to sleep and maintain consciousness, and suddenly you are in a dream and you saw it like creating around yourself in real time while still knowing that it was a dream. You could be in a dream and suddenly notice something strange, and this is the kind of lucid dreaming induction that we will talk about today. And so, yeah, you notice something strange, you don't have an explanation for that, and so, yeah, you say there is no other explanation other than I am dreaming right now. So, actually, some of you may, when I say the word lucid dreaming, they might think something like this. And we have no audio.
Space would be all about the visual, but it's more about the feel of it. My question is, what happens when you start messing with the physics of it all?
So this is, of course, a very famous scene from Inception. All right, so yeah, she's very talented. All right, that's it. I have never done that in a lucid dream. Absolutely not. I wish I could. I don't know, I just fly around a little bit, maybe. But yeah, this degree of control that has been like, that again, many people, when we talk about lucid dreaming, and they do a lot, talk about lucid dreaming because it's a great it's a great topic for parties, for example. So you talk about lucid dreaming and everyone is excited about it, and sometimes they talk about Inception, for example, and you have to be the one that says, yeah, but it's not really like that, because lucid dreaming is all about being aware of the dreaming state, but it's not a given that you also have control over the dream. There is not any kind of linear relationship, not even on the degree of lucidity, because it's actually a spectrum, and the degree of control that you might have. Also, this is quite spectacular. This would take probably a lot of brain power in order to have this. My dreams would collapse way before something like this. But yeah, just to clarify a little bit. Why should we study lucid dreaming? This is a question that many of you also asked me in the last few days, and there are many answers to this. First of all, by a clinical perspective, so a psychotherapeutic perspective, it has a lot of potential as a therapeutic tool for PTSD and nightmare syndrome treatment. Like, for example, you may have recurrent nightmares, all right? So you continue, dreaming about the same, maybe violent encounter and very difficult situations. You can actually teach yourself, or through the help of other teachers or therapists, to be able to recognize when you're dreaming, and especially when you're dreaming that recurring situation, becoming lucid in the dream, and maybe deciding to not just run away, not just living in the fear of that kind of encounter, but actually deciding to react in a very different way. And trying to maybe, there are many ways to do this. You may try to hug the creature or the monster and try to have a loving relationship with that. You may try to have a discussion, try to ask the dream symbol, what does it really mean to me, right? So lucid dreaming could be a really strong and powerful link with your subconscious, and while talking actually a language that is comprehensible in both directions. It is receiving increased attention in recent years due to its relevance to neuroscience of consciousness, because of course you are completely conscious, or you have the potential to be in a lucid dream. So it's a state of consciousness, but for some it's a hybrid state between a dream, in which we usually only have primary consciousness, and a wakefulness, where you have both primary and secondary consciousness, for example. So also by a neurologic, neuroscientific way approach, it could be really interesting. You could have also some degree of experimental control over dream content while maybe using EEGs or fMRIs. If any one of you is able to sleep in an fMRI, just hit me up, because we have experiments to do, but it's really difficult. And well, long-date lucid dreamers may experience improved problem solving, emotional regulation, and memory recall. There are quite some studies that try to demonstrate this. It's still a matter of debate. I personally find that lucid dreaming for me had a lot of positive outcomes. And yeah, it is a skill that can be learned through various approaches. So today we're talking about learning lucid dreaming through the use of reality checks, all right? So reality checks are basically actions that have different outcomes, whether you perform them while awake or in a dream, all right? They are based on dream dynamics. I like to call them dream rules, which are basically things that you can expect to happen in dreams. All right, dreams have rules, have phenomenological rules. Like, for example, details. You know, details in dreams aren't really set in stone. If you look at something detailed, like writings, for example, or paintings, why not? You come closer to it, you try to really read that and pay attention to it, you gaze away for a couple of seconds, and then you look back at it. Chances are that the writings or whatever you were looking at would have changed in the meanwhile. So, which normally doesn't happen when you are awake. So yeah, you have all of these kind of tests to discriminate. And yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. And how does this work? Why doing reality checks while awake should help us doing them also while asleep and gaining lucidity? Well, this is because of a phenomenon that is called the daily residue. It is a well-known phenomenon that basically means what we do during the day has a certain chance of being integrated into a following dreaming session. There are many studies about this. Some type of events are integrated like the very same night. Some others appear after a couple of nights. Some others, again, after 5 nights. But the thing is that eventually, if you have a habit of doing reality checks, you will eventually do them in a dream as well. There is a catch, though. Dreams are the realm of expectations, all right? So if you do a reality check, but you are not open to the possibility of being actually dreaming while you perform it, it could fail. Or maybe you could say, yeah, the writings have changed, but you maybe rationalize it, and you're like, yeah, they have changed, but I wasn't paying attention, or maybe, I don't know, you project something else. So you have to really believe in what you're seeing, but also being open and critic about it. I mean, you have to be really mindful about what you're doing, and yeah, trying not to decide beforehand what the result is going to be. The success of reality checks is based on belief, and people nowadays are not very good at believing without seeing first. This is only one way, actually, to induce lucid dreaming, but we decided to actually focus on this very methodology because we didn't want to induce dreams, lucid dreams in people at command. There are other ways in which you can have this kind of effect, or at least have a certain chance to do it. We wanted our participants to actually learn to lucid dream, so to develop the right mindset that would make them lucid in their dreams spontaneously, without using the so-called, for example, wake back to bed techniques, which are very well known. They are based on sleeping for a certain amount of hours, then waking up, then staying up for a little while doing cognitive exercises, and then going back to sleep again. This kind of approach is actually very successful in inducing lucid dreams the very same night, but you're not actually learning to lucid dream. You don't develop that mentality that will make lucid dreams come to you instead of you altering your sleep cycle in order to have them. So how can we show people what it's like to be in a dream, to be aware while in a dream? How can we show people how a successful, a positive reality check would look like? Well, this is where virtual reality comes in. At least this was our intuition, and this is a Tibetan monk that is playing our application during a festival. So what were our objectives when developing this project? First of all, we wanted to show, make people acknowledge and familiarize with dream dynamics, so the rules that I was telling you about before. So what can we expect in a dream, right? I was talking about fluidity, all right? The fact that things tend to change in dreams. This is just one type of what we call dream science. So those phenomena that you should be mindful about and trying to notice. Whenever you notice something strange, something unusual, something unexpected, and dreams are full of these events, but also our waking life is, we should do a reality check, for example, right? We should get into this mindful state. Our second objective was making people develop the appropriate metacognitive protocols in order to become lucid in dreams. So again, you notice something strange, you are mindful about it, you don't try to immediately rationalize it and find explanations about it. You do the reality check while being, again, mindful and open to the result. And then, of course, we talked about superpowers, because in lucid dreaming, although you might not always have control, you might have some. And it's good to know what you can do in a lucid dream. At least for the first experiences, this is also very motivational. Finally, we wanted to use fully the abilities of virtual reality. So we want to take the most out of the immersion capabilities, the presence that one can feel while in virtual reality, the fact that you have hands and you can move around and interact with things. All of these three objectives, of course, work together and amplify each other. So how is Lucid Dreaming VR built? Its structure is actually a training app divided into 8 sessions of roughly 20 minutes each. These have been developed with, these 8 sessions should be ideally played across one full month, all right? We will talk about more about this later. And so, yeah, like a couple of sessions per week per 4 weeks, for example. But of course, any user would be more than free to enjoy it however they want. Sessions are preceded by a 15 to 20 minutes shamatha meditations that are based on Alan Wallace's The Attention Revolution book. For whoever in here is interested in lucid dreaming, I highly recommend this kind of approach. And also the shamatha meditations were based in a virtual environment, in a very natural virtual environment. Sessions 1 to 4, so the first half of the sessions are basically tutorials in which we explain how to recognize dream signs, which kinds of dream signs one can expect, and also what reality checks are, which are the main ones that you can try, how to manage and stabilize lucidity. Sessions 5 to 8 introduce narrative elements that are closer to dreams, and we have superpowers. We have a constant reminder of all the dream mechanics that you have studied and tried and experienced before, but in a narrative framework that is also highly motivational and effective. this is exactly what I just said, so yeah, that's it. So I want to show you some short videos of what lucid dreaming VR is. Dream science, changing environments. I think you all are quite, I don't know, maybe you have touched with your hands the fact that in dreams, environments can be very fluid, much like words and writings and stuff. Everything can change. Just you gaze away and things have changed. Sometimes they change even while you're actively looking at them. So this is a representation of that. So there you go. Well, opening doors. I don't know. I'm a video game developer, so I wanted to do that. So yeah, you turn around and the door has disappeared, for example, right? In this application, you can point at these strange things or at things that have changed in order to do reality checks. So that's why I was doing this with my finger. This is also a very powerful way to express that you have noticed something. So yeah, right now the door will open. It will. Yeah, in here there is another little training session. And when it opens again, now you will notice that there was actually a wall before that now has disappeared. So now you can actually proceed through the level, for example. And this is, of course, also a way for us to, compartmentalize the house. In any room, there was other kinds of trainings. And then, yeah, they get out again, and then there are stairs. All right, so this is just a short example of how this might work. Another really short example is the paintings reality checks. So the fact that in dreams, paintings can change, maybe not in this very obvious way, but they might still do it. I hope you can see it. So yeah, you gaze away, and the paintings have changed. This is quite, I don't know, some strange things will be now projected on screen if you are quite sensible. It's not blood, but if you're sensible, just, I don't know, be mindful of that. So we have fire. We have a fire situation. We have a crisis situation. The fire is actually spreading out of that, all right? And the person is now looking at their hands, and the hands may change in dreams, all right? They look at them for a while, and this is a very strong reality check that triggers lucidity. Now, this is how we rendered, in this example, the lucid state. So we have much brighter colors and lights. And of course, yeah, a friend of mine designed that, and I approve that. But yeah, fire cannot, even in this potentially stressful situation, a fire, which could happen in dreams, the very moment in which you realize this is a dream, those flames lose the necessity to be hot. You don't have to burn anymore. There is no need for it to be painful or to be scary and all. You can just stay there and decide to interact with it differently. One last video. I don't have a sense of time right now, so I don't know how long I'm gonna go. 5 minutes? Fuck. This is really beautiful, though. In dreams, gravity can be really strange, all right? It can behave in a very strange way. So maybe the first few jumps that you might do might be like real and normal. But after a while, if you believe in it, or if you're lucky, you might do higher and higher jumps. And this is, again, one of our reality checks. And now the person is lucid in this simulation. And you can see how beautiful the place has become. Well, it was beautiful before as well. But yeah, this is just also another way to represent this. This is the 5th session, and actually there is a parkour session on rocks, and it's very fun. We did an experiment about this, though, so it's a very cute application, but does this work? We had 3 conditions. We had a control condition in which we only had traditional training and no VR exposure. Traditional training is basically doing reality checks throughout the day and keeping a dream diary in order to have better dream memory. The VR control group had both traditional training and the use of a custom VR app that is unrelated to lucid dreaming. And finally, in the experimental VR group, we have traditional training and the use of lucid dreaming VR. All three groups have this traditional training because we believe that through this application, we have a potential catalyst, we have a facilitator. This doesn't want to be an induction technique per se. It has to use this traditional training as a basis, all right? This just wants to amplify the results. The experiment lasted 35 days of daily practice. We already know what traditional training is. We had some measures, of course. We had an initial survey to also filter participants. We had some questionnaires that only people after VR sessions had to compile. We are not talking about those today. We also had daily questionnaires for dream recall and the Lucid scale, which is the lucidity and consciousness in dreams scale. This was developed by Ursula Voss in 2013. And it's basically a scaled survey that helps to determine the cognitive activation and the secondary consciousness presence or ratio in dreams. And finally, a descriptive report was asked for only for lucid or pre-lucid dreams. Lucid dreams are the ones in which you are aware of the fact that you are dreaming while you're dreaming. Pre-lucid dreams are those dreams in which you doubt, you have some doubts about it, but maybe you don't arrive to the right conclusions afterwards, or maybe you forget about it. The VR control application was very similar to the Lucid Dreaming VR, but was actually without any kind of training. The person had to find baseball balls all around for 20 minutes. And so, well, 35 days, so 5 weeks, those in the VR control and in the VR experimental groups had to come to our laboratory twice a week for 4 weeks, as I was saying before, to enjoy the various sessions. All right, so we had 8 sessions together of these things. Every morning, every participant of every group would compile those questionnaires and tell us about their dreams. So let's quickly see the results. First of all, dream recall. It starts from the very first item in the x-axis, that is the original reported dream recall of our participants before the start of the experiment. As you can see, basically all 3 groups are around between 1 and 2 remembered, or, well, yeah, remembered dreams per night. Sorry, 2 per week, actually. And that very fast, in a very fast way, jumps up to 5 or 6 or 7 dreams per week because of the dream diary, basically. We know from scientific reports that just by keeping a dream diary, your dream recall gets immediately better, or at least in a week's span. So yeah, this was very important. We cannot see, I mean, we can know if someone has done a lucid dream only if they remember dreams. So this was a prerequisite. Number of lucid and pre-lucid dreams per group. So this is very interesting. In our control group, we had 11 between lucid and pre-lucid dreams. VR control counted only 4 in total. VRX had 26, a whopping 26 between lucid and pre-lucid dreams during the 5 weeks of experiment. Not only that, we know that from the control group, around 60% of people had at least one dream with characteristics of lucidity. That is way higher than the VR control, where only 1/3 of participants had at least one dream with characteristics of lucidity. But finally, we know that 84.5% of our participants in the VR experimental group had at least one. So these are quite high numbers that we are very proud of. Yeah, these are the normalized distributions. I don't have much time. This is the distributions of lucid in blue and pre-lucid dreams in brown across the 5 weeks of the experiments. As you can see, this is the control group. We have a little bit of spikes at the beginning, and then it kind of plateaus back to like 1 pre-lucid dream per week in the 4th and 5th. VR control has really low production. And in here, we have our experimental group, in which, of course, we have a spike at the beginning, but then we still have a quite high, actually, plateau of lucid and pre-lucid dreaming reports also on the following weeks. Yeah. And we were wondering, like, why did this happen? right? I mean, I'm very happy that the application works, but we were wondering why. So we used the Lucid scale in order to have some more insight. And to do it, we used the insight subscale of this questionnaire. So the Lucid's insight subscales basically goes from 0 to 5 and calculates reports how aware was the dreamer of the irreality of the dream during the dream itself. All right? It is given by 6 items, and here are some of them. While dreaming, I was aware of the fact that the things I was experiencing in the dream were not real. Of course, this is one of the major ones. While dreaming, I was aware of the fact that other dream characters in my dream were not real, for example, etc. We can jump this. And this is what really struck me. Participants in the VR experimental group has a very high mean insight value across all of the 5 weeks. This is significantly higher than the other 2 groups. And the most important thing is that in here, we are not considering lucid or pre-lucid dreams, but only ordinary ones, like the ones that were not reported to be lucid nor pre-lucid, you know? So this is seriously interesting, and I believe this is a kind of approach that should be more frequent in dream research. What probably happened is that by working on this mindset through reality checks and also through this kind of first-hand interaction with the dream environments, through the VR simulation, let's say, people have developed this kind of mindset to be more doubtful of the nature of the reality they are inside. And this actually shows in all dreams. So probably in certain moments, this goes over a certain threshold, and we have a full-blown lucidity. Otherwise, it just stays over there. But this really works on the probability of this happening. So yeah, this was the main takeaway, actually. Conclusions. These findings indicate that the traditional reality testing-based training, complemented by a specific VR application, may represent the most effective and reliable method for medium-term lucid dreaming training, possibly due to a generalized effect on lucidity-related features, insight predominantly, of all dream mentation that facilitates the emergence of spontaneous lucidity. With this, sorry for the delay, I thank you a lot. And if you're interested, this is a short bibliography that I referred to. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And this closes the session. I propose those who have questions just come talk to Andrea directly, because we're already over time.
Yeah. Oh, I have the...